Hi, I'm Akira.
And I'm Rohan Rahul.
Welcome to The Long Take. This week we're discussing Blonde with Ana de Armas playing Marilyn Monroe, or rather, a version of her, if that can be loosely described. It's a 170-minute epic, which I watched basically in parts on the same day, but there was no way I could get through one sitting of it. How about you, Rohan?
I watched it in one go. I had one break.
One go, like no pauses.
No pause. I had one break for like a minute or two, but then, one sitting essentially. Um,
Right.
and yeah, I mean, I thought it flew by. Like I was dreading it, which is understandable because we aren't used to longish movies these days. But yeah, I felt it just flew by. I was totally invested. Like I'm obviously leaning positive highly, but then this is the kind of movie where you kind of need to let it simmer a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure where I am right now, but I feel like, which I will get into it. But I mean, there's things about the treatment of like the way it's presented that I have, opinions on. But then there's obviously like the way the treatment of the character itself, right? Like of the real life person who very much existed 70, whatever, 60 odd years ago. Of the approach that it takes, to her life without ever saying it on screen, right? Like, there's no like, it's only if you read outside the movie will you know that it's based on a book that's a fictionalized account. But the movie never says that on screen ever. It's presented as if this is a story of Marilyn Monroe, which I found to be deceiving. It's dishonest to me because you should. I think
But
you should.
does any movie do that?
Yeah, some movies say, like some movies will say based or say inspired. Like it's not, there's no word like that. It just opens, it throws you into there. And if looking at it only the movie and you're never reading about it, you would be like, oh yeah, this is Marilyn Monroe's life.
I think what they're trying to do is, because the movie is so unconventional, like anyone watching this, first of all, they'll be like, oh, acha, we never thought this is what we're going to watch, right? It's not your conventional biopic. So immediately you're like, right, where is the story? Where the beats that I'm used to? So that's going to happen. And then you're going to be hit by the surrealist quality of it, right? Nothing is basically, it takes some time to get used to. But I would say,
yeah, it's because it's not a drama, right? Most biopics are dramas. This is a psychological horror. It's almost like an exaggerated, even more blown up version of like the last year one, right? On Diana.
so Spencer was still based in some sort of reality, right? Because you had like, it was a condensed version of a larger situation that people had passing familiarity with. So it's basically filling in the dots of what happened during a particular thing, which...
Yeah, but then it had to be fictional because like it was sort of expanding that story from her perspective, right? Like everyone else was presented basically as villains in the royal family.
Correct. This one, I feel like the Lynchian tone of it is so in your face, so immediately. You don't need that disclaimer of it being fictional because nothing that you're seeing is real in any way. It's like an exaggeration. It's like it's an amalgamation of a bunch of things. Broadly speaking, I think it does capture, like, she is a tragic figure, right? Which is what the movie is basically saying. Like, she was abused by multiple people in her life.
That's the thing, right? Like it's only when you read outside of it do you like discover that even that is like cast doubt upon, right? That maybe not all of it was like that one-sided. Because the book that's based on, it's obviously the author is taking that view, right? That she was a tragic figure and then everyone basically abused her and threw her out at the end. But a lot of people out there who say the opposite version, who say that she had very much a hand in crafting the image that she developed in Hollywood. And towards the latter end of her career, she was basically in full control of it. Like there was no one who could tell her what to do.
That's true. And the movie kind of does hint at that when she refuses to show up on set and she summons Marilyn Monroe, right?
But also like skips over like some like major parts of her life, like where, like her first marriage is never shown. We just skip past those years. The movie never delves into the fact that she was a businesswoman at some part of her life, and she, that she wasn't just like a pawn in the studio game. She got so fed up with the studio system that she created her own company.
Just going for the conventional approach, right? And I think the movie announces that from like minute one. Like it's an art house movie disguised as this major biopic, right? For instance, I couldn't sit through the movie that you're describing, which is Elvis, which is like ye hua fir ye hua fir ye hua fir ye hua, and I could not sit through it. It's one of the worst theatrical experiences of my life. I would have walked out of that movie. And I found that unbearable. I was like, तुम पागल हो क्या? तुम 2022 में ऐसी फिल्म बना रहे हो और बोल रहे हो कि you should take this and people are watching it. Anyway, this one is not that, right? It is so brazenly like, it's like a middle finger to all notions of this is what you're supposed to expect. And it doesn't care about what what elements it's picking or what elements it's not picking of her life, right? It's, if you think about it, it's a Wikipedia summary, right? Ye hua, people, the dialogues are essentially like in one sweeping sentence they'll cover like 15 things that happened to her.
Yeah.
Right. So in a way, it's very like exaggerated. Even the lines that they speak aren't. They seem fake. Like nobody would speaks that way.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, that's how movies are, right? Like you're not supposed to have like mundane dialogues.
Are introduced, like when the men are introduced, they give like their own backstory. एक लंबे speech में कि this is who we are, this is what we are about, this is our role in your life. This is what's going to. They foreshadow what's going to happen. So it's all very like dreamlike. And I thought that was massively engaging. Abhi to matlab we haven't even spoken about the character. I'm just saying like the structure of it and the craft of it and the weird directions that it goes in. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, but since we're speaking about the craft, like what do you make of like the two like major sort of like visual
which is the aspect
approaches,
ratios.
Right? Aspect ratio, and then the fact that it keeps switching from color to black and white and back and forth.
So I don't know what do you think about his assassination of Jesse James?
I actually haven't seen that one.
Okay, so that's like one of my, I would say, all-time favorites, like top 20.
Right.
Like, I'm obsessed with that movie. That is amazing. Like, and it's very similar in a way, right, to this film. Like, you wouldn't think it as like an epic western, but then that's a movie about celebrity, right? It's so Jesse James, the outlaw. Again, he's drawing from stories and stuff like that. It's not like as Aaron Sorkin says, it's not a photograph. It's a painting, right? So that story is about this larger-than-life figure who was very much a celebrity in his day, right? Everyone knew his name. And this person who was basically a stan, like he was obsessed with Jesse James. He goes and he develops a relationship with him and he kills him at the end. Similarly, that movie is also about like fame, celebrity culture, popularity, all that stuff. It came out at the height of like the Kardashian era. This movie is also about similar things. And what that movie does, and this movie also does, is that visually he draws from old photographs. So Jesse James, he's using those old, I don't know what exactly those cameras are called, with those stands and like flash bulbs and stuff.
Right.
I'm forgetting. Daguerreotypes kaun se hote the? Wahi hote the?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Anyway, so he's like Roger Deakins in that movie created like from scratch, he created like lenses and he would attach them to like modern cameras and I would get like a very vignette like hazy sa look, to mimic
which he wanted to do here. I've read that he wanted to do like 16mm footage for like some of the scenes that would fit, because we've seen Marilyn Monroe movies that are 16mm. But then Netflix apparently said no because they have a digital camera mandate.
Netflix is, so it's not conducive to, like, his filmmaking style is not conducive. Somehow magically a movie has been made.
Because I guess other studios probably wouldn't like greenlight this kind of passion project.
Oh yeah, absolutely not. The black and white stuff in this is similar to Jesse James' aesthetic. It's like Life magazine, right? And I've seen this once, and I'm sure that there is a separation between Norma Jean and Marilyn. And when Marilyn appears, that is when a certain aspect ratio or like the black and white or the color is used, as opposed to when she is Norma Jean. That is my reading of it, because she herself looks at Marilyn as an alter ego, right? Like a movie star. She wonders.
She completely like dissociates it. Like every time she sees herself like anywhere on magazines or like the cutouts on the streets or on movies, she's like, who is that person? I am not that person.
So it makes sense for the movie to stylistically separate the two sides to her personality, right? Because this person is not well, right? She is not well in the head. She is completely broken by everyone
Yeah, which is
around her,
like
and
sort of implied to us, right? Which is like when she asks if
no,
she's first pregnant for the first time, she goes to a doctor and she's like, "Is that what my mother has? Is that inherited?"
yeah, she. That is the central drama, right? Like the central drama is, do I? In a way, I thought of Hereditary, right? Similar again, like she is so concerned about inheriting whatever her mother had and not like giving it to her like child. Like
Yeah.
that, like she wants a child, but then she's also concerned like क्या उसको भी same illnesses होंगी जो मुझे हैं, and that
Yeah,
is
which is why
something she
like in
does
the
not.
first time she's pregnant, she's literally like flipping back and forth between like keeping the child and not keeping the child like every 2 minutes.
Yeah, and uske baad it's taken out of her control, right? Which is
Yeah.
also like she there is an illusion of agency, but she has no say in her life, like absolutely not, in no way. And she's almost like, I thought of like she's like a fairy tale character, right? She's almost innocent and she's so naive. Like every chapter of her life, she enters with some level of optimism despite having been like broken previously. So जैसे ही वो घुसती है, she's like, oh, maybe this time it'll be okay. But you
Yeah,
know,
which is
and
what like
I know
happens
it's not.
from the first marriage to the second marriage, right? Like even after having that abusive experience at the hands of the first husband, or second, because we never shown the first
Second,
one.
yeah.
She goes with the third one, the playwright Arthur Miller. Like she's fully like, oh yeah, this will work out. Like I'm so happy. Like those early scenes of her running around the
Beach.
grass and all. She's like, yeah, or the beach. Yeah, she's like, you know, this can be different. This one can be like beautiful, and this can really change my life or something.
Yeah, that was one of the few moments where she's actually genuinely happy, right?
Yeah.
And the movie lets you know, like the movie is so, like tonally, it's so like precise. For like, I think almost all of it, like it's so
because
precise.
even the soundtrack changes. I noticed, like in those every time, they used to want to showcase how she was feeling inside her head. The instruments used for the soundtrack would change accordingly.
So initially, there's a lot of like, there was some electronic stuff happening when the whatever she's in a relationship with those two, which is entirely fictional, I'm told. Right.
I mean, all of it is fictional. I think even all these pregnancy stuff we're talking about, the abortions we're talking about, even those have no evidence.
But at least they're in like the universe. Like people have spoken about. I don't know if like she had any sort of connection with Charlie Chaplin Jr. Yeah.
Chaplin Jr.
Like that I've never heard about at all. Like I've heard about Acha theek hai.
I mean, yeah, I had never heard about like any of her like pregnancy stuff before.
Acha nahi, wo to suna hua tha na.
Reading about they were like, I mean, it's been alleged like everything has been alleged posthumously. Like there was nothing about pregnancies during her life.
But then though, even the JFK bit is so like talked about, but there's no actual evidence. Like there's literally one photograph of them together, right? And that is the conspiracy, which the movie does not kind of get into. It just plays its cards ek scene mein, and you're like, acha theek hai, this is what you think. Got it. It makes no bones, right? It's not playing wishy-washy, this movie. It's like, oh yeah, this is what we want to present, and we're not going to like be like on the fence about anything. Like she had abortions, not 1, 5 times. Ye lo muh pe. You know? You are saying she did not have a relationship with JFK, and she says it in her own words. You're like, no, not only did she have a relationship, it was like the most messed up scene in the movie is the JFK scene.
Yeah. Literally, like, I think she's raped like 3 times on screen.
Yeah, and that end mein jaake they hit you on the head with acha theek hai. You thought her trauma was ho gaya tha uska, but like, wait. The most powerful person who enters her life does that, right? So it's like, you thought it was escalating. There was some kind of light at the end of the tunnel, but no. And she goes into it. She's like innocent, walks into it, right? She walks into it.
Yeah, it's a meeting of souls. Those are our words before she walks into it.
Which is again that naivety, that innocence, right? She goes into every situation not knowing. And that is what the movie is also saying.
Maybe
right?
like knowing, but maybe almost like pretending. Right? It's almost like she's trying to tell herself that life can be better. Because it's like, I mean, it's almost like depression, right? Like it shows she had like some shade of it or some version of it. Is that when you're sort of just like plowing through life, like everyone thinks your life is perfect, right? Like when it's like when her whatever person who's trying to dress her up is like, yes, people would give her their right arm to be you, So her public persona feels like, oh, perfect, everything amazing. But when your life is so terrible inside, you're just trying to like tell yourself that tomorrow can be better, this thing can be better, that thing will change it, this will be better, or that will be good.
Yeah, she's constantly striving for. एक तो वो भी उसका डैडी इश्यूज वाला सिचुएशन ना, she's living in,
which is why these men, right? These men are all father figures replacing that dad who's never there.
Yeah, so that is also like some kind of delusion in her head, right? And the horror stuff happens also, that note right at the end before she dies, right?
Yeah.
Which is, again, it's cruel almost, right? And
Yeah,
the movie
it
is not being subtle about it.
Because someone kept giving her hope, right? Her entire, like, that's what this, at least this version is presenting, that someone
She
gave
gave
her hope
herself.
that, yeah.
It's all imagined, right? She gave her hope, and she knows that it's not true. And that letter at the end is the reality hitting her. Like, you have lied to yourself all these years. There is no hope. And that was the only thing she was clinging on to, right? And then when she loses that is when she loses her life. So, in a way, she knows that she's created this.
Yeah, I was surprised like they chose that route. Like they were like, oh, now this, the fact that, I mean, given how the movie is like making up stuff, I was half expecting that the biggest rumor around her, that, or at least a controversy, is that somehow Robert Kennedy was involved, right? So I was surprised that the fact that they made JFK such a villain earlier in the movie, like just half an hour ago, I was like fully convinced by that point that they were gonna like push that controversy as well, that Robert Kennedy would be there somehow.
There was this stupid ass documentary, I don't even want to call it documentary, on Netflix, like 2-3 mahine.
Yeah, it's on Netflix only. Yeah, it's a Marilyn Monroe tape nonsense.
So I watched that. It was like full garbage. I watched it 2-3 months ago and watch it now. That is an issue. Like, that is a problematic film, right? That does recreations of a full conspiracy theory. That was a murder where I was like, oh my god, this is some like real Sushant Singh Rajput level nonsense that you created, right? Now that movie,
and you're calling yourself a documentary also. No, it's not like you're calling yourself. At least this one is calling himself a film.
Yeah. No, उसमें तो full nonsense. Like they're like, oh, the Kennedy brothers ने उसका murder किया, ये वो छुपाया गया था, all that nonsense happens. And from what I've read, I'm not sure, like the book has that like angle as well, right? That there was some conspiracy theory regarding.
Yeah, you would imagine so, right? Because that's like the biggest literally controversy, except from what everything the movie creates or whatever the book creates. I don't know if the book has all this rape nonsense and the blowjob and everything. But given that that was like the thing that everyone should talk about, I'm sure the novel had some version of it.
But I don't know. Like, I do think it's wise of the film to not lean into the conspiracy theories regarding her death, at least. Like other things.
Yeah, but even the other stuff, like especially around the JFK stuff, like it's literally implied that not only does he rape her, he sends Secret Service to break into her house, pull her out, take her to the hospital, get an abortion, and then dump her there, and then basically convince her and that she was basically dreaming or something.
Yeah, so
all of it.
So my like reading of it is like, if every other person before JFK has treated her in a certain way and it's ended with the death of a unborn child, right? Why would the cycle stop with JFK, who has been the worst to her of all those people? So in the world of this movie, it's an escalation of like abuse. That was the only logical end, and that was exactly where I was anticipating it to go. Like, again, like you cannot do this again, but then the movie does.
It's also a power escalation, no? Like it's initially she was with someone like who was at least like on a normal level, just an athlete, and then someone with an industry, and then she literally like climbs to the level of like president of the country.
Yeah, it's never ending, right? Joe's ka cycle tha. Like the origins of it also the movie kind of investigates, and then
at least with the other people it's also like personal, right? It's like the person itself doing it, but when it reaches like the JFK level, like he's not even doing it himself now, he's now outsourcing the abuse to his Secret Service. It's
every like to some level, everyone, like the filmmakers, the movie does not delve too deep into that, but then she was, at least earlier in her career, she wasn't treated well on set, right?
Yeah.
And that is something that you can easily imagine, like abhi bhi kaun sa अच्छे से treat करते हैं लोगों को on set. So like you can imagine back then when she's a nobody.
When she's nobody, and plus when studios have literal full power, right? Like the contract system existed. You couldn't work anywhere else. There's literally
Which the
just like one
movie-
conversation about it. Like they just have one scene recording of how brutal Hollywood was back then.
Yeah, the
The
movie
whole
is
thing
not
about-
interested in her career as much as, you know, the image that the career resulted in.
Yeah.
So the burden is not पैसे कमा रही है कि नहीं कमा रही है. The burden is कि, oh, will she be able to sustain that, the existence of that person? Which is, I feel like a lot of people in that position, or at least that level of fame, have spoken about, right? Even Shah Rukh Khan would say, okay, I'm not like that person who you see in public. Like, I have to summon him. Like, I don't know what he once said, that he's servicing the myth of Shah Rukh Khan.
Yeah. He spoke about that on the David Letterman show. I'm sure he's spoken about that elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, watching this, I was like, oh yeah, like this, now you've created this monster, now you have to kind of, or you've had this monster created for you, like you haven't even like created. Like there's this sense of she was a talented actor, right, who wanted to do meaningful work. But
yeah, which is where sort of like the movie's taking that version, right? That the monster was created for her, but like in real life, people are alleged that she played a part in creating that image as well.
Played a part in like fleshing that image out for sure. But
Yeah.
then the persona was created for her, right?
Yeah, I think so that's also said that she created played a part in creating the image, but then she wasn't happy later of how she got typecast, basically, right? Like she created this image, obviously, of how like dumb blonde, but then she basically got like pigeonholed in that she could only play that forever.
Yeah, which she did also, right? One of her final movies was like a dumb blonde movie or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I remember watching a few Marilyn Monroe movies many years ago. And
I've seen very few, I think. I've seen Some Like It Hot.
Some Like It Hot, 7 Year Itch, you know.
That one I haven't. I feel I've probably seen like one or two at max, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know, the ones that I watched were all like quite chipper. I don't know what else to say. You would not like, you've heard over the years of how she died, right? Which is strongly implied, even in real life, that it wasn't like an accidental overdose, right? She was so I felt like we'll get to the final moments of it, but I felt like the movie had like a drastic like shift at the end.
Yeah, there was also corresponding, as we noted earlier, there was also corresponding soundtrack shift as well. It almost became like, it was already a psychological horror, the entire movie, but like in the end, literally like the tones they were using, then the instruments they were using, I felt like I was in Requiem for a Dream or something.
So there was that night vision sequence that happens just before the death, right? Which is like, you're fully like in a horror movie now.
There's literally a man standing chipcoat to a wall in her room.
Oh, Blair Witch
was never addressed.
Yeah. No, but I'm talking about the actual final moments of her death. There is like a stylistic switch where, did you notice like the camera is placed on the ground almost, right? So it's so that's
where the movie ends.
So in the movie ends, right? So there is, for over whatever 2.5 hours, he's been like stuck to her face, like, oh, ye dekho iska chehra, and end mein he's like, oh no, we're gonna step back and the camera is going to be put down because the tamasha is over now, like almost. And just the acknowledgement of that is also like indicting yourself now, because you have been participating in the tamasha for 2.5 hours. I'm not saying
which
audience, I'm saying like
to a level
Andrew Dominik himself
does.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that
through the movie he does it himself, like the way he like sort of, especially the way he recreates that iconic photo, right? I feel like almost like he was participating in the myth of it while trying to dissect how ugly the men were around her.
But I think it was the prism through which the movie is told is entirely Marilyn, right? So you never leave her side, like the perspective is entirely hers. So when she is posing in that recreation of that iconic shot, you know that she's being gawked at, right? He cuts, and it's almost like vulgar, the gawking, right? And he's like lingering on the faces.
Yeah, that's why he like exaggerates the size of the crowd as well, right? To like see, like, it wasn't just like the people who were there gawking, it was like
entire country is gawking.
In effect, the entire country gawking at her. Yeah.
So he's making that very clear that this person was being objectified and gawked at. Even the scenes of abuse,
which hasn't gone away, right? Which is still done today to actresses.
It's still done today. Even in the like the scenes of abuse, you don't really like the DiMaggio stuff happens off screen.
Yeah.
The first one, the Xanax stuff is there. It's brutal. It's the first one because then you're like, oh my god, what? It just throws you in the deep end with that one. But then he holds on her face the entire time, which is something similar which happens also in the JFK scene, right? He holds on her face. So the film's allegiance is very clear to me, right? It's not going to say that she wasn't treated badly, but then it's going to also be by her side while it happens, which I thought was a smart way to kind of avoid the exploitation stuff, because it's very easy to see when a director is being exploitative, right? Just by not just music and performance, but also like something as simple as कि तुम्हारा camera कहाँ पर है?
Yeah.
Right.
And camera कहाँ पे है, and who is it being played for? Is it being played for the characters around her, or is it being played for her?
Yeah, and it's not even just a close up. It's like a tight close up. Like her face is filling the frame, so you know what she is going through, and the performance is so strong.
Like, sometimes to even more emphasize that, he like uses those like weird lenses, right? But like the background becomes like all like swirly and like merging into each other, and only the face is left literally, which is unaffected.
Yeah, and the face is communicating all the horror, right? And that once that is communicated, the horror of it, then you're like, what are you going to, are you a monster? You're going to feel for her only, not like you'll feel bad for her only. You're like, oh my god, this shouldn't happen. And that I think the movie communicates like everything else. It's like turned to 11, but then that communication is vital.
Yeah, which is, and talking about all this, like I'm sort of, and also like mentioning Spencer at the start, like I'm sort of almost like sad that, you know, you don't get to see Netflix movies in India on the big screen, because I love the Spencer on the big screen, because like that's what you go to the big screen for, right? Like, I mean, as much as now the big screen is flooded with like visual CGI and like nonsense and like just like stuff being thrown at us, like spaceships and like explosions and like lightsabers and all that. What like it's amazing about film on the big screen is that you can see the human face at like a scale that you cannot in real life, right? No matter how close you get into someone's face in real life, you cannot match that with like just like being presented on in the cinemas. And I don't have the option with that. Sorry?
Just imagine the close-ups in this movie.
Exactly, yeah.
On a big screen.
Which I mean, I can still, even the stuff from like Spencer is still burned into my head of the close-ups of her like face, Mission towards. But I don't have the option with like, even the maximum I could do was like my TV. I cannot go bigger than that at home.
I mean, I was watching, I don't know, did you watch Athena earlier this week?
No.
Like, that is a big screen movie. Like, what that person is able to do in that movie like, blew my mind. Like, after seeing so many movies over the years, you can at least theorize, if not like solve the magic tricks. But it's me, like, oh, I have no idea. Like, you have bamboozled me. I have no idea how you were able to pull that off. Like, and watching that on the big screen would have been incredible. Like, because मेरे laptop पे मुझे इतने मजे आए. Similarly with this, you know, like, you're making films for the big screen, you idiots, but you're not.
Yeah, just shame, right? Like, cause they're not committed to the big screen. Like, they're only committed to the big screen if it gets them nominations at the awards. Otherwise, they have no care for the big screen.
And honestly, you know, I feel that they shouldn't, because people don't deserve good stuff. Because then I always think back to the Roma screening which happened in Delhi, and like, it was free and it wasn't even 30% full. Like, you cannot lure people with a free screening.
Yeah, you can't lure free. Make it like keep it as it is. Like, it's fine if 30% people showed up if they paid for it, but free makes no sense. But yeah, when the movies come here, like, they get stuck either with these free screening nonsense, or they get stuck in film festivals. Outside of that, there's no chance you get to see any Netflix movie on the big screen in India. Although, like, speaking of the theatrical thing, should we, I guess, close out with like talking about the rating, which I don't understand. I don't think it's justified. Although in India, it's just A, which I guess makes sense, but the US rating makes no sense to me.
So I don't think they're going for the nudity or anything, because that is not.
Yeah, it's always like not that, right? It's always like when like stuff like birth stuff or like abuse gets involved, and the rating system gets up and it's like, oh, how can you show that on screen?
So I think it's
how can you
just
show
like
abortion on screen?
it's just sustained level of abuse is what pushed them over the edge. Because we've seen, what was the last NC-17 movie that I saw? I don't remember. Blue Valentine? Blue Valentine was NC-17, right?
No idea.
और उसमें तो it was very clearly like, oh अच्छा ठीक है, इसमें तुम्हारे बहुत people are naked, so which is why very very naked. So
I mean, yeah, even like here, she's probably naked like for half the time, especially in the second half of the movie. But
it's not sexual.
That doesn't cross the limit. Like I've seen a lot of A movies where like nudity is commonplace. It's the fact, I think, that the way especially like the scene like where she gets up from the JFK or abortion and there's like blood all over her. I think that's the kind of like scene that pushes rating bodies to be like, nahi ban, toba, like how can you show that?
Yeah, it's more of a thematic rating, which the CBFC would not understand. CBFC is like,
they wouldn't.
Middle finger dikha band karo.
Anyway, I thought it was like self-censored in that movie talk about.
So it's more just like the intensity of the experience is like you cannot, it's not for everybody, which is basically what they're trying to say. But it's Netflix, so literally children will watch it. I don't know what.
I mean, yeah, parents like I haven't done settings properly.
The NC-17 is for the 3 theatrical screenings that they're going to have in their own theater.
Yeah. In India, it doesn't matter, right? Like, even if you have like parental control set up, if you allow A movies for your whatever, like middle to teens, whatever, then they can watch it because it's A in India, just as every other movie, literally.
The NC-17 applies to a very, very small fraction of this film's eventual audience.
Okay, then. That's all for this episode of The Long Take. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at thelongtakepod. You can write to us at thelongtakepod@gmail.com. Please leave us a rating and a review. Wait till this episode, and we will see you next week.